Classic Talk.
Hi, Tom, you all right?
Yeah, I'm all right. How are you?
All right. We've been busy, haven't we? We've been
Yes.
having some chats.
We have plenty.
Yeah, I mean, when we started this in lockdown, we were a bit bored, and we kind of just sharing kind of thoughts of what was happening, and it was just very much kind of let's talk about what we were doing, what we're not doing, and we've managed to get a few people to talk to over the last few weeks, and we've got some more coming up soon. We spoke to Alex Riley, and this week we've got a gentleman who is quite a successful YouTuber. Petrol Ped is what he goes by on that newfangled thing, YouTube. He's just got a nice insight into what we're probably more passionate about, which is the older stuff, and he's probably more passionate about the newer stuff. But I suppose really that's not being unfair to him, because I think he's just got a passion for driving anyway, hasn't he? Really?
Yeah, I got the impression that anything that moves pretty much is what he's into, and
Be careful what you say there. We're talking wheels here.
Like you said, he came across as really genuine. His passions were quite clear as well, and also he seemed really open to other people's ideas as well. Because we've discussed before on this, is that some people tend to think what they think is right, whether that's originality, whether it's modding, whether it's the way a car's driven, and he just seemed to be up for listening to a range of different opinions, which I thought was really refreshing and nice to hear as well.
The key thing that we're going to find out later on, and we've got 3 of these coming up, is that he is one of the presenters on Vintage Voltage, which has been on Quest recently, and I think it's been quite successful as a series, and telling us a bit more about electric classic cars and the conversion of electric, to electric of classics. So we talk about that later on with him. And anyway, we start off the first time we meet Petrol Ped, and also known as Peter Greaves, by the way, and he's also known as Pedro on Vintage Voltage on Quest. We started talking to him about YouTube and his channel, what makes him tick, and the fact that he's got 71,500 subscribers now and climbing, and notice every day it just keeps going up. So we talked to him about that and his passions and what makes him tick. Hi, Ped. We've got Ped on the line.
Hello, chaps. How are you?
Brilliant. We're good. All right, thank you. Normally, don't you start your YouTube channel with "Hi guys"?
Hi guys, and welcome to Petrol Ped. Yes, today I'm on the line with 2 fellas to talk about classic cars, apparently.
Yeah, what a catchphrase. I mean, that is your catchphrase, I think, for the channel, isn't it?
Yeah, probably is now. I mean, I guess when I started, I kind of looked at what everybody else did and just came up with that, and it stuck. So
yeah. So how long have you had Petrol Ped as a YouTube channel now?
It will be just over 4.5 years. Yeah.
Wow.
So
things have seemed to have moved on quite a bit in 4 years, because I've seen you all over the place. And of course, people recognise you from Vintage Voltage at the moment as well.
Hopefully they're watching that, yes. Yeah. But that, it's very weird, because I kind of started YouTube very much as just a hobby. I used to watch the guys on YouTube and thought it looked like fun. I'd never made a video. I'd taken still photographs, but never really edited any video. And then, you just pick up a camera and give it a go. And over time and lots of persistent hours of effort, it starts paying off eventually.
And I think people who've seen Petrol Ped will see that you mainly, shall we say, 99.9% of the time, you are reviewing modern cars, new cars that are out there.
Yeah, not entirely by choice. I like to try and bring a really eclectic mix of stuff to my audience. So I guess if you think when you start a YouTube channel doing car reviews, your biggest challenge is always getting access to cars. So, over time, I've started with my cars, then I worked with some dealers and got access to cars, and they're all pretty much going to be new or newish cars. But then as you get bigger and you get more audience, you're able to try and get access to better stuff, and that spreads out to other things, not just new cars. So, you know, one of the most popular, well, in fact, the two of the 4 most viewed videos on my channel, one is a classic Mini and the other is an RS 2000 racing car. So, you know, they are classics, right? So
Yeah. And I think, you know, as we grow up, you grow up in a certain era, there's like the 70s or the 80s or whatever it might be, or for Tom, probably a bit later than us perhaps. And we all have that kind of love of what is around at that time.
Yeah.
And I suppose that informs, you know, your opinion on modern cars. And I just wonder, do we all have the same kind of passion, people from a classic car point of view and people from the modern car scene? Are we all separated by the same language, to coin a phrase? Do you think we're kind of divided, or do you think there's a commonality between us?
For me, the things I look at in a car, you can find them whether it's new or old. So I love what I call a driver's car. I love cars that give you a driving engagement, that visceral feeling of a car, and you can get that in anything from a Caterham or a classic Mini all the way through to, I drove the new 718 Porsche Spider last week, and that was fresh out the box, but gave me that feeling. And then the other thing is looks. So, you know, if a car looks beautiful, whether it's old or new, I think they're what I look for. The really interesting thing, being a Mini owner, is clearly in the Mini world, there's a big debate, isn't there, between whether a modern Mini should even be called a Mini or not. But when you get Mini owners together, we just appreciate each other's cars, whether they're classic Minis or modern Minis, for what they are. And I think that's, for me, the most important thing.
You don't own a classic Mini at the moment, but have you owned a classic Mini before?
No, I nearly did. My first car was very nearly a classic Mini, and then I ended up buying a Mark 1 Fiesta. So, right. Because it was a bit bigger, and I regret that ever since, really, because I'd love to have owned one. So I would love one, actually. And I've driven a couple on the channel. I drove, as I said, the one was quite a well-tweaked one. It had a big supercharger in it, and ran about 160 horsepower. And the other one was a Paddy Hopkirk Rally Tribute car, and they were both brilliant little things to drive. So I would love a classic Mini. If I had my wish list of classic cars, in the top 3 would definitely be a classic Mini.
Yeah. So you said about design and how a car drives is kind of the thing that perhaps you're passionate about within a car. Yeah. Is there apart from the Mini, do you have a feeling just for British cars, or do you see a difference between German cars and Italian that you've driven before? Is that still something?
I think there is a difference in terms of I mean, they all sound quite cliche things, though. You know, you drive German cars and they're always just so well engineered and so well put together. You drive an Italian car. I'm a big Alfa Romeo fan, and they just have this exuberance about them, and the way they drive. And I'm very lucky. I have clearly driven all the new ones, but at Festival of Speed 2 years ago, Alfa Romeo asked me to drive a 1900 SS up the hill, and that was from their museum. It's the only one of its type in the world.
Yeah.
And you drive something like that, and it was such an overwhelming experience of a car. It was just beautiful thing to look at. But when you drove it, it just communicated with you and sounded amazing, and it had lots of things that weren't great about the design, but that's an Italian car for you, right? But it just made up for it by just beautiful looks. Absolutely stunning.
Yeah. And I suppose they're quite raw in terms of what they are, which I suppose is similar to what classics are about, isn't it? It's almost that sense of, you know, you put it in gear and you drive the thing rather than messing around with too many computers. I suppose Alphas are probably still a little bit like that, perhaps.
The new ones are, yeah. I mean, that I guess the no driver aids thing, very, very much is when you drive a car that has nothing to help you out, you remember what it's like to be a driver, right? You have to do everything yourself, and I love that about cars.
Yeah, I know that this vehicle I've got at the moment, which I keep talking about, which is a VW Iltis, it's a four-wheel drive thing.
Yeah.
You just hang on. It doesn't go very fast, but
Yeah.
you just got to put your weight into it. It's not a performance car in any means, but you still have to really, hang on to the thing and put some weight behind the wheel to get it to turn. And I suppose, yeah.
I mean,
And
one of the it's funny because I wasn't sure whether my audience would really like the classic scene so much, but actually my demographic, because I'm I think there's only Harry Metcalf as a YouTuber older than me, really. So I've got quite an older demographic. So I did a film on a Peugeot 205 GTI recently, which I know is more of a kind of modern classic. But the response that got was amazing. It was because I think it just took everybody back to that golden era when they first, or my audience anyway, when they first started driving, and it was that aspirational car. And whenever I've driven older cars on the channel, people have just loved seeing them, I think. So there's something about it.
I think part of that is the fact that because you are seen to be driving so many modern and new cars, I think they kind of appreciate and respect what you would then think of an older car getting into an older car again. And the fact that you see something in that is something that kind of, if he likes that, then I probably would, get out my modern vehicle.
I mean, I tried very hard. There are certain YouTube channels that do similar things to me that only drive supercars or only drive, a certain brand of car. And I've tried really hard to get that mix. And I like the experience of driving an older car or something a bit different and bringing something different to the channel. And my audience likes that too, because it's a varied content is always a good thing. It's not the same old stuff week after week.
Because you drift.
Sorry, Andy.
Tom.
No, I was going to say, absolutely. The point you were going to make on supercars as well. Do you think sometimes now there's almost an apathy towards supercars almost because they're so ridiculous, if that's the right word, and they're so unattainable that when people do see one, they just go, oh yeah. Whereas if you're seeing in something that you can actually maybe get your hands on one day,
absolutely. I get sometimes a more positive response from driving a 320 diesel BMW than I do a 200,000 pound McLaren. So, I think when I started the channel, I thought maybe this would be my enabler to get to drive a supercar, and then you get to drive a supercar and you think, wow, that was amazing. And then when you actually get to spend time with one, you realise that actually they are a ridiculous thing. They're brilliant in every way possible, but they're also ridiculous. They are modern day supercars are so fast, you can't drive them anywhere near their limit on the public road without breaking the law. And therefore you don't really get that engagement. Whereas if you drive a car that's slower and less powerful, you can rev it up to the red line in, first, second, third and fourth and still not be breaking the speed limit and feel like you're going 1,000,000 miles an hour. And there is an element to that.
Yeah, I suppose
I think.
Sorry, I was going to say, I suppose it's like chucking an MGB around a corner in Lake District, holding on to everything in your life, and then you look down and you're doing 45 miles an hour. And it's,
exactly. And it's normal. I try very hard to be just a normal guy. I don't have, loads of money in the bank to go and buy a supercar every week. And for me, I just find that quite distasteful when you get this. It's almost, it's so unrealistic. And unfortunately, I feel a big responsibility for young kids watching YouTube. So many young kids think that they can start a YouTube channel and they're going to be able to buy loads of supercars, and it just doesn't work like that. You have to be realistic. So, my cars I own are realistic, and I'm very lucky I get to drive some amazing cars, the vast majority of which I could never afford to buy. But I like to try and share that experience with people. But when you get something that has no driver aids and is all down to you, there's something very special about that as a driver. Mm-hmm. You do a really nice gear change in a car with no synchro mesh, and it's suddenly the best thing ever. Yeah, on a modern day supercar, you pull a paddle and that's it. That's the simple fact. So,
you spoke of the younger generation as well and your responsibility to them. Their passion in the future is going to look very different to ours, isn't it? Do you see that being an obstacle maybe, or do you think it's something that they can engage with and actually use as a force for good, I suppose, almost?
The really interesting thing is, if you speak to youngsters, don't be surprised if their expectation of a car is it's going to be electric, because I spoke to a guy recently, and it's one of these stories that just made me think really hard about stuff. So I was talking to a guy who has a Tesla. He's got a Tesla Model X, and he has a 5-year-old son, and he's owned an electric car ever since his son has been around. So he's always had an electric car. And last year they went on holiday and they hired a car. And they got in the car at the airport and started driving out of the car park. And his son absolutely freaked out and started screaming, "Daddy, Daddy, stop the car. What's that horrible noise? There's something wrong with it." Because he'd never been in an internal combustion engine car before, which is, for us, weird. But that was the norm. So the younger generation, I actually feel sorry for our generation, because we're so used to internal combustion engine cars that we're so plugged into them, and that's probably not a good word to use, is it, when we're thinking about electric, but we find it very difficult to break away from that. And if anything, the work I've done over the last year or so with electric has made me realize that there is something other than an internal combustion engine car. And the work that we do on Vintage Voltage, or the work that the guys do at Electric Classic Cars, takes cars and gives them a totally different character, but gives them a refresh.